So far this semester, we've talked about the acquisition cycle, so the expenditures and buying stuff, and the idea of cash disbursements. We've talked about the revenue cycle, which is the money coming in, cash receipts, our accounts receivable, all of those things. Production is the middle piece between those two. So we're going to buy a bunch of stuff, convert it into something that we can sell, and then sell it. So this just shows that relationship between the cycles that we have talked about so far this semester. So let's take a look at the inventory cycle. So I'm just going to zoom in here for a minute. So we're going to start up at the top. First, we have production planning. So this is where we're going to forecast our sales. We're going to say, we think we're going to sell 1 million units this year. We have 250 on hand. So we're going to need to produce 750,000 more. So here's just where we're going to project out those future sales, determine the type and quantity of items that we need to produce so that we can have a plan. In the production planning, we're going to also provide a schedule for manufacturing to achieve those goals. So we're going to produce these 750,000 units. We need a schedule to figure out how we're going to actually meet that goal. And that's going to include what raw materials we're going to need, what labor we're going to need, just how exactly we're going to be able to achieve that goal of producing those 750,000 units. We want to see authorization in this planning. So we want to see when we are acquiring these raw materials and these goods to meet that sales forecast, we want to see that authorization there. When we move down into production, here's where we are. We have said we need those 750,000 goods. Here's where we're actually going to produce those. Custody is the big control we want to see here. Not everyone should have the availability of being able to deal with or hold those that inventory. So we're going to produce those goods. They're going to get added to inventory. That we're going to sell them to customers. So we see that relationship with that revenue cycle. Our payroll cycle is related here because we're going to have that direct labor that's going to get included into that cost of our inventory. And then we're going to have some of these records that we're going to be using. Also, we'll have the bill of materials. So I don't, oh, that one's right here. So the bill of materials is like a recipe. So it has all the items that we're going to need in order to produce those goods. So the bill of materials is kind of the new one that we have here. But these are just some of the documentation that we would want to follow that flow of inventory from our raw materials to work in progress to finished goods. So the bill of materials is kind of that new one, which is like our recipe card. Relating to cost accounting. So if we go up to section 3, here is where we have the cost accounting, where we're keeping those records of the costs that are associated with producing that inventory. So some things that we're going to have here are a standard cost. So that's like our estimate of how much it should cost to produce these goods. And we're going to want to compare that with how much it actually costs to produce those goods. And that will help us to determine how well we're doing in the production process. We're also in this cost accounting piece, we are going to have our allocation of our overhead. So over here, we know the direct materials and the direct labor that get put into that inventory. We also have to allocate that overhead amount or those indirect costs to our products as well. And all of that helps us to determine our inventory value as well as our cost of goods sold. And that essentially is the production cycle. So if we think about assertions relating to the production cycle, Existence is one that is typically considered pretty high. So if we think about this and we think about what existence means, what we would be concerned with relating to inventory is that they state they have a certain amount of inventory, but they don't really have that much inventory. There are some cases from like the 90s where this one pharmacy called Farmore, the audit was pretty scheduled, and they always knew where they were going to be to do their inventory testing. So they would stock up that where they knew the auditors were going to be to show all that inventory. So they would move all the inventory that they had into one warehouse, and then they would move it to the next warehouse. But they were double counting their inventory because they didn't really have all that inventory that was shown on their balance sheet. So do they actually have all of the inventory that they are showing? So that's our first assertion that we're really concerned with relating to the production cycle. Valuation. So this idea of lower of cost or market, are we going to be able to sell the inventory for the amount of money we have into it, or are we going to have to take a loss on that inventory? Cutoff, making sure that the inventory is recorded in the correct period. So that is also an issue. So presentation, is it raw materials? Is it work in process? Making sure that it's recorded in the correct place. Who owns the inventory? Also important. You'll notice completeness is low. So completeness would mean we've gotten some inventory in that hasn't yet been recorded. So we have inventory sitting on our warehouse floor, but it hasn't actually been recorded. So, so our list of inventory is incomplete. We have things missing. That's typically not really a concern. If they have inventory, they're going to want to include that. So those are the assertions that we're really concerned with in this cycle. In the next video, we're going to chat about the inherent and control risks, as well as our tests of control that we will do relating to the production or inventory cycle. And then in the final video for this chapter, we will talk about detection risk and our substantive procedures that we can do to test inventory. So that is where we're headed. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Have a great afternoon.